All right, it's 5:30. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Next, we'll consider any agenda adjustments.
I don't have any.
Hearing none. Okay, we're gonna move to public comment next.
The idea, we've moved this up just to give you just a little sense of what we're doing here, and this is an experiment, is, we always had this at the end, which really doesn't give the public a chance to to give you their thoughts on things on the agenda. And so the thought here was move it up, lots of towns do it this way, give people a chance to give you their input on anything on the agenda. Then when you get to the agenda items, you guys can actually talk to each other. And you don't, you don't have a practice of opening every item. I know the select board like opens every single item to the public. That's not been your practice. Your practice has been to try to keep the agenda items for you to talk to each other about what you want to do and then make decisions. So the notion is, if we're open, it's like input on anything on the agenda that folks want to give you, and when you get to the agenda item, it's actually your turn. That's the thought. So if anyone in the public has comments for you on anything on the agenda, this would be the time under this thinking.
Is there anybody?
No, there's nobody online. There's nobody online.
Okay, moving on, approval of minutes of September 6th meeting.
I'm going to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Motion's been made, seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. In favor, say aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Check register approval.
I'll make a motion to approve the check register.
I'll second it.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the check register, say aye.
Aye.
Let's have it. Next is the joint rules amendments.
So just to tee this up for you, this came to you many months ago, 4 or 5 now, I want to say. And you had a short discussion at that time. This is to change some of the rules around how appointments are made and some of the rules in there that you and the select board make jointly. And we decided at the time we really wanted to hear from the select board first. They have talked about it. Now they got through all their budget processes and they approved this request. So in my memo to you, I basically laid out 2 paths. I basically suggested that there's a governance issue here that I thought it was worth raising to you. And then there is, we're in a moment of activism, so do you want to reward activism? So on the governance issue, the history of Vermont, and I suspect the history of Morrisville and Morristown, and it's true today because we've had an open planning council seat for quite some time now and no one's applied for it, is that it's really difficult to fill seats. And so changing rules to make it more difficult to fill open seats is not good governance in my view, which would argue against this change. On the flip side, you're at a moment of community interest in governance. And so, you could argue that if you didn't pass this, you're actually kind of not encouraging community interest in governance. Just laying out the 2 paths for you, Bob. And that you could argue is a reason to do it. And then in a couple of years, if what happens in most places, I hope it doesn't happen in Morrisville, Morristown, but usually you go through waves of community activism. It lasts for a few years, it wanes for a decade or 2, and then it comes back again. So if you had to then readjust it when activism slows down, you could do that. So basically laid out a path. If you wanted to vote yes, there's a path to vote yes. If you really are worried about governance and good government, there's a reason to not support it. This is just the world according to me. She's just one person. So I wanted to lay those both out for you. So,
I thought we approved this almost 2 years ago.
you did, but then these are changes to it so that select board and trustees, I believe, can't sit on other bodies.
Well, that was in there last time, wasn't it?
No, And
No, it's
so
discussed.
he's not a member of the public, he's here as a resource for you, so I think Todd can speak.
Yeah, so, it's actually, that language with the, was slightly modified. Before it said, any member of joint board shall not sit in another board, which, that was Tom's suggestion originally. I found that something problematic. Let's say you and the select board want to create a joint charter committee, for example, hypothetically. And you wanted a select board rep and a trustee rep on that 5-member board. You couldn't do that, so I kind of like that communicative link. So this language was changed by the select board during this, to my point here, and during the discussion. It just basically says, if you're the big boss, if you're a trustee or a select board member, you shouldn't be on the DRB plan. That's pretty much it. But it doesn't rule you out from being on a joint charter committee, a joint whatever committee. But just, it deals with the 4 big boards, that's all it does.
Well, last time the big issue was about Tom being on the planning board of the trustees and Gary being on the select board and the DRP.
Still does that.
And I thought we cleared that up. Guess we didn't.
No, you wanted to see the select board, it took the select board 4 months to weigh in, but the select board has finally weighed in. The select board had a hard time getting out of their budget hole. And they're finally out of that, so they finally got to other things, that's why it's finally coming back to you, it's just been a while.
Okay.
They don't move as quickly as you guys do.
Can I get a motion? We can go into discussion, we have to move it into. We have to move it. into-
Usually,
Yeah,
we
we
have
have
a discussion, that's the normal process.
And then you can always write it down if you're not.
Yeah.
I mean, sense of hesitancy to
That's right.
move it, but.
All things can also fail for lack of a motion, right?
Going once, going twice, I'm gonna make a motion. No motions are made. What's the procedure on that?
It doesn't pass tonight, could be brought back, you know,
Fails to carry, it's fine, it doesn't matter to me either way, I'm just here to make sure I understand the rules that the boards that staff operate under, so if you guys don't want to pass it, it's like that. Go back to the select board with it. Have them undo their votes.
Okay,
All right, thank you all. Would you like me to stick around for the select board potential joint meeting discussion?
it's totally up to you.
I was here for the joint,
You're here.
if you think there's value in me being here, I'm happy to stick around. That's it.
Yeah, I'd like you to say that.
Yeah, no, okay, thank you.
All right, moving on to other business.
let's defer A, because the whole point was to have David here.
Okay,
And I thought he was gonna show up, so, but that was a follow-up the last time's question about where do we maintain and who owns what, so.
Yeah.
So let's defer that if you don't mind.
okay, then moving on to the potential joint meeting with select board.
Yeah, so I think things have evolved, there was a lot, the select board's had some conversations. You know, I've talked to some select board members about their interest and not interest. From when I wrote the memo to you, it's narrowed. So I think right now, what I understand, and Todd may have different information to me, but in the discussions I've had, I think what's on the table is essentially the trustees, if you're interested in meeting, the trustees and select board at one joint table, speaking with each other about issues of common interest, things that hit both Morrisville and hit Morristown, so things that are relevant to both. There would not be food, some people might bring dessert, they might bake their dessert. It's not the date that is available, which is October 25th. Is the country club is not available, so it would be at the VFW hall. The public would be invited, but not a participant. Just to be clear about that with you, which I think is consistent with past events of this sort. So it really would be a chance, you wouldn't have the relationship building around breaking bread. For whatever reason, even when we discussed if everyone pays their own way, there's not interest in that on the select board side, at least not enough to carry the day. So that part is not on the table as it's been described to me, so it, and it doesn't mean it's not their way or the highway, it wasn't expressed that way, it was like, this is a clear path. And the belief is most select board members would likely show up. It's not a guarantee that 100% would, but most select board members would likely show up to a meeting like that with you all, to have some discussion about issues of common interest. So that's where we are. I think the first question is, are you open to a joint meeting this year? And then the second question, if so, I put in my memo to you, it'd be good. There's not a lot of point in you all showing up and saying, what do you want to talk about? I don't know, what do you want to talk about? So if you had some topics that you as trustees think you might like to talk about at a meeting like that, and then what I've heard is once the select board gets a list like that from us, they would add to that. And then it'd be up to the two chairs to kind of figure out a priority order and how to kind of put them on the table, if the meeting happened. That's my understanding of the current status. I don't know if you know something different, Todd.
Select board's not my purview, I have nothing to add, I think you summarized it well.
Okay. So it wasn't listed in action, I don't.
So we're just gonna get together and talk, it's not gonna be, I mean, it's not gonna be anything like that's. Other than that, as far as, I mean, the last time it was kind of odd when we were eating and we had people waiting, and it just felt kind of odd, it was like,
Yeah.
it was
So
like a division.
we'd all be around a big table, the two boards, and you would talk to each other.
Yeah.
That's the current proposal, as I understand.
So number one's off the table.
That's right. I was clear, I didn't think that you all would love that idea.
No, because the trustees sitting down with select board member and groups of the public, they're gonna wanna talk about the budget, the roads, the fire department, everything else,
May not-
has nothing to do with this.
Right, that's what I said, it's not that you all don't wanna talk to the public,
Yeah.
it's that
We
that's
don't wanna
not
talk
what.
about town issues.
Right, exactly, that they have to be common issues and that, so this wasn't the right place for that, there may be a time and place for the select board to have meetings with the public, or for you to have meetings with the public, but jointly, it didn't make a lot of sense, I told them I thought you'd have heartburn over that, that's exactly the reason you just articulated, and that was fine, they said, let's take it off the table. Yeah, so. So are you open to an October 25th meeting for this purpose?
Are you?
This was one of the dates you all said you could do, so I don't know.
Enough for us to talk about this.
Alright.
We think we need to hash out between the two boards.
I don't remember, did I start a
Overlap.
list in the packet? I don't even remember in the memo if I did or not.
I have two potential issues.
I mean, the one thing that we talked about was like
I mean, we're gonna.
water sewer line updates versus paving, and if we're doing our construction and they're doing theirs, and how that might impact.
And so that's a good one. I had also put, and I don't know if these are anything you're interested in, but statewide zoning impacts and reactions to that, you could have Todd kind of lay out, what's this gonna mean next year now that the state has superseded certain zoning laws in town? I
And to
know,
piggyback on that, you'll both have had zoning hearings at that point.
right,
You both likely won't have voted, so anything that comes up at either hearings that you're not aligned with, I'm gonna try to get you to discuss those issues. Hopefully there won't be any, it's a pretty minor zoning update.
Yeah.
But we might have a current pending zoning update discussion at that meeting, if you will humor me.
there's also the issue of, statewide, like, there's a lot of housing, it's not just Morrisville, Morristown, there's still a lot of housing. But there's no housing stock, and I personally think a lot of that still has to do with Airbnb and Vimo, just taking them off the market. As many are going into that market as are being built almost, and it's not really having an appreciable difference, so
More.
is that worth talking about?
Well,
Right,
Morrisville, you can't have any Airbnb in this unless you live there.
It's gotta be owner
plus
occupied
one,
property.
right? Yeah,
Yes.
plus one,
But our definition of owner occupied is still pretty loose. The trustees are always firmer on this. You guys passed maybe the first short-term rental or
Yeah, we
rules
did.
in the state.
Yeah.
And the select board finally got on board rejecting it 3 times last year. But the owner occupancy rule still says if I'm Todd from Boston again, back in 2006, before I bought a place in Vermont, I can still buy a place in Morrisville, never show up here and short-term rent it, because it's my only Vermont resident. We did that to ensure we didn't exclude snowbirds who aren't Vermont residents from being able to short-term rent. So we still could tighten it more if there's any interest in that, I'm not sure there is. You, instead of having your own Vermont residents, it could be by voter checklist, it could be by homestead, you can other ways to tighten it if the board so choose, but I really want. Most people don't know what the village and town lines are, I'm one of the 12 people probably in this town that do. What I don't want is different rules for Morrisville and Morristown, I need us to be all paddling in the same direction on that to effectively.
Just a couple other examples, because these are only intended as examples. You know, at one point, the select board had interest in talking about the village and town boundary. I don't think they do anymore. At one point, they wanted to talk about the local option tax. I don't know if they still do or not. But they're proceeding with it, but what's the crossover with the village? But there may be interest in that. And then I also wondered, with all the state energy policy stuff that is raining down on us, that actually has a lot of implications in town that Todd certainly is aware of. The select board may or may not be, but it might be good for them to hear about some of what's coming on. Penny's issue about, you know, the wastewater issue, water also is important on that. And that feeds, of course, not only into how do we coordinate with the highway department where we're written stuff up, but it then has direct implication of where those lines are with this new statewide zoning overlay that has been done. Because where the infrastructure is where we lose control. Essentially, is if I was to boil S100 or whatever the number is down, that's basically what it says. Where you have infrastructure, towns lose control. So, and some of you have said, then we're not gonna extend any lines anywhere. If that's until the state gives us back control. So anyway, those are just some examples. You may have different ones. I just started a list for you. You know, there may be others on your mind, so, you know. Yeah.
The Airbnb thing, New York City just enacted an ordinance. You cannot have an Airbnb unless you live. I mean, we've got so many people grandfathered here now, but why do we grandfather everyone?
Well, zoning is always forward-looking, if it's in a zoning bylaw, everything before the zoning bylaws enacted is grandfathered, and zoning always forward-looking.
Okay,
If we chose to do an ordinance instead, there's not the same grandfathering of an ordinance, so many towns, for example, when you regulate signs, you'll do a sign ordinance because it gets after the old sign that you don't wanna look at and you wanna regulate in some way, it's not just forward-looking, so we could do something different, do an ordinance, but we've done zoning before. I do think it helps to draw the line in the sand, and it helped us, but with the grandfather, yes, the genie's out of the bottle, and generally, you don't get that genie back in the bottle.
well, another thing is, has there been any provision for enforcement?
Provision in terms of other than.
If you don't live there and you opened an Airbnb after that date is.
I have enforced it, but like everything else in my office, my instruction from the select board is I rely on complaints to enforce things, so I have gotten complaints and have enforced not legal Airbnbs. Because the party house and they ticked off the neighbors call me and say, hey, you're short, let's see your short-term rental. I can see it, I can figure it out by the house and the map and not allowed, here are the rules. That's happened at least a handful of times.
Have they done anything about it?
Yeah, they stopped.
So it's more a question of, do you guys want to talk to the site? Are these topics that are of interest to talk about? Do you have others, you know, that you'd like to have talk to the select board about? These are just, I was trying to seed the table for you to see if there's any items that you want to talk about.
Yeah, I'm for it.
Another issue, and I don't have a solution for you, since you're interested in the Airbnb thing, is a lot of these places get set up as single purpose LLCs. Which he's not gonna know is an owner occupied, because, you know, it just shows up as an LLC.
Well, if they're getting a homestead tax, it's supposed to be occupied.
Yeah, I will look under the hood and make sure it's different, it's the same or different managing members, if the same managing member is a different LLC, I'll do that.
Yeah.
Just like active.
It's just a lot of work. They make it hard for him to find it.
Correct.
If somebody makes a complaint, people are really crafty about making it hard to find these things from just going in to see Sarah and saying, who owns this property? It's like, well, I don't know. This goes to this LLC, which goes to that LLC, which goes to
And it
this
goes to
parent.
And the thing is, if they claim they live there, they're gonna supposedly get the homestead rate. I would think,
I kind of like doing the homestead, but I couldn't ever, politically, that was not passable by that select board at that time. Maybe the tea leaves are different now, and maybe there is some possibility that the select board may enact tougher rules, we can go down, we can talk about that. I don't think planning is going to initiate that on their own unless the select board kind of, or you guys say, hey, flashing green light, you guys should look at this, and they'll look at it. I mean, they're gonna do S100 for the next 5 months anyway. After that, they would take that up again. They would like to have stricter rules. I can't speak for the board, but I think on the whole, they would like to have stricter rules, but they don't have approval authority, and the select board, I mean, it took 5 years just to get any rules in the town. So we'll see.
Yeah, because we had it in the village 5 years ago at least.
Correct, yes. Yeah. And it sounds like for the, Scott touching this a little bit, at one time in the town plan, you've all voted to work on the village charter. It sounds like the select board's moved off that. The select board, I think, wants to do their own charter at this point. Because if they did the village charter, even expand the village charter, which you guys may not want to do, which doesn't work either, they're still worried about missing short-term rental income off Sterling Valley Road, which obviously is pretty far from any new village line. So I think they want to do their own charter anyway.
There's a lot of benefit from Morristown to eventually having.
Yeah, everyone should have a charter, you get some modicum of self-governance, so it's important.
Any other ideas of topics? I'll leave it open and I can at least give them this list and then some board can jam on that and see if they have other ideas
And Penny's suggestion is great too.
Yeah,
I've been
yeah.
at meetings where we talked about, you're replacing the water line, hey, we're about to pave that, let's wait to pave that, but literally that saved a lot of dollars just having that open discussion about what paving's gonna happen, what water line's getting done, what sewer line's getting done, make sure we coordinate.
It's difficult for me to believe that in a town village this small, that wouldn't just naturally happen.
I know.
We caught it before, we caught it at a trail.
I got it.
I think you were that.
Wouldn't you think that it would just naturally happen?
Silos happen everywhere and they happen here too.
I do think it's better. I think our folks talk to
Yeah.
the town
A lot.
highway foreman a lot more.
Correct, yeah, I think we're way better than we used to be. There was a time as your employee that I was like, myself or Sarah Hassens were the only good students. No one talked to anyone maybe 10 years ago, and it's much, much better now.
That's good.
A lot of that's thanks to Penny too.
Okay. It sounds like we've got, something I can get back to them and we'll see what happens. That works for you.
I'll bring cookies or something.
I think Judy's planning to bring a dessert or something.
Okay, good.
Something like that, and then, so, I don't know.
Could have like just a community cookout. And invite.
Bar gonna be open.
And then everybody can.
Nobody out there.
Get more involved.
Support.
I'll pass that back along. The message to me is that there are some members that would have interest and but it's a bit, pretty much a non-starter for the meeting. So, but I will take that back and share that. Oh,
Okay.
you wanna go back to 7A?
Let's go back to 7A.
Hi, David.
My apologies for being late.
It's okay. It's all right. You can go whatever you
You got
want.
that?
I'm happy, you know, it's not good, and I'll stick the rest of the thing out.
So this, David, was the, so on the service lines for electric only. So who owns what, under what circumstances, and who maintains what, under what circumstances? Which really started with the who's supposed to maintain what, but they're interrelated. The who owns and the who maintains on the service line are interrelated, and it, not surprising we confused you all last time with the various responses we gave. It's because there actually was a wrinkle where the rules changed, and so there's actually multiple sets of rules of who owns and who maintains, so why don't you just walk the trustees through that issue as best as you can articulate it?
Sure. So as of 2021, January 1, 2021, we started observing the tariff a little bit differently. So anything after the secondary bushings of the transformer is customer owned. So if the service drop is on the pole, everything from the top of the pole to the house, customer owned, and we install it because they can't climb up on the pole to do that. If it malfunctions for whatever reason, they have to get a electrician to supply the parts that have malfunctioned. Now, if we are caught in the middle of the night, 20 below zero, the person doesn't have the means to get their power back. We've always done our best to get people's power back that night. So on overhead service, so transit goes on the pole, wire goes from the pole to the house. The point of attachment is the demarcation zone between what we own. Everything after the weatherhead is customer owned. So two different,
Weatherhead is the part of the pipe that goes down the house.
yeah, weather tap or weatherhead, a little text water.
And that was before 21? Is that what you're saying?
That is everything after 2021.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And this aerial service is treated just a little bit differently because the customer doesn't have the means to install it, maintain it.
Yeah.
We're gonna be rolling a truck to do the aerial service anyways. Prior to 2021, we had the responsibility to own on the underground portion from the transformer to the meter socket. So the demarcation zone was load side of the meter socket or the bottom side of the meter to the house, customer owned, everything above that we own.
That's for
Underground services. If there was a pad mount transformer sitting on the ground, a pedestal next to it, we own the pedestal and to the meter socket. Everything after the meter socket was customer owned. That changed 2021. Again, everything after the secondary bushings of the transformer, the wire, the conduit, the pedestal, the meter sockets, that's all customer owned now. So if that fails, the customer has to come up with the materials to fix it.
And the aerial, Waterline owns it from where it attaches to your house and goes into the back of it, or the splices up.
Splices at the weatherhead, yeah. Everything down the side of the building for meter socket is customer owned.
Okay.
And who maintains what?
Will maintain the connections behind the meter in the meter socket. Just routine maintenance. If it's a repair, we won't do the repair. That's
About tree trimming?
tree trimming.
That was the original question.
Okay, tree trimming on the aerial service is if the. First of all, we don't have easements for those secondary aerial services. So we're obligated to repair or maintain clear trees that are in the high voltage lines. That's our obligation. The secondary lines, if it's an immediate threat to their service, say there's this huge limb, obviously gonna take their services down, we will clear that if we have the equipment to do it. If we don't have the equipment to do it, the limb is too high or too big or whatever, we will coordinate with the customer's contracted tree trimmer by probably taking the service off the house and letting the tree trimmer drop it to the ground.
Okay.
David, do you advise the customer that there could be a potential, they can see it, but I mean, do you guys ever advise them that, you know, you should take care of this because?
Yeah.
Okay,
If it's below the telephone, I don't have a problem telling the customers they can cut that stuff. And it's up to them to maintain their trees, their property until it gets away from them. And when it starts rubbing through the insulation, creating, you know, either a electrical hazard or a failed service, we'll step in and make the necessary repairs and clear a path for that wire to be unobstructed, nothing laying on it. But we're not taking trees off of people's houses just because they want the tree gone and it's leaning over their house. That's not our responsibility.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's all clear now, it wasn't clear at all when we tried to explain
I've had a lot of practice explaining it. Getting a lot of calls about trees.
Yeah, I bet. Okay, thank you. Moving on to, management updates.
it. Any question on Kevin's piece? I can try to answer the ones if you have any questions on them. I will tell you, Cadence Falls continues to be worked on, the ERG's been up a lot, working on, particularly the vertical there. So we did we're gonna have to dredge up both tail races at Katie's and the tail race at Morrisville. Turns out, because that finally got exposed to, we had high water until like a few weeks ago, like literally since the flood, we couldn't even see the tail races. And they're basically full right to the top, so 20 by like 40, and they're just filled. So we're gonna have to dredge, we filed for the permits with the state of Vermont and the Army Corps. And hopefully they'll say yes, and we'll put together a bid package for those.
And who does that?
Contractor. So these two in particular, we'll see how people propose to do it. I don't see any way based on the maneuverability and the access. I don't see any way but an old ledge plan. And they're deep enough that you're not putting